How did you end up in Australia?
Uh, so I, uh, as a sort of in my professional life, I'm an economist. Um,
Yes, Dr.
and
Keaton Ellis.
hey,
Dr. Keaton Ellis.
oh yeah, the phrase I have there is Dr. Ellis is my dad. Call me Keaton.
Sure.
Uh, Especially when I'm in the cubing world, I still want to feel like I'm 15 years old. Um, but yeah, so I did a PhD at the University of Maryland, which is where I'm from, and I did a postdoc for 2 years at UC Berkeley out in California. And my wife was doing her PhD at Penn State, and essentially we had 7 years of long distance. And so when we went and tried to apply for jobs, the goal was to get something that um, essentially we were in the same place.
Yes.
And of the pairs of jobs that we got together, we got a pair of offers at a university down here called Monash University. And they're a really good institution. They have a lot of research support. The people around us are really good. Um, and Melbourne's a really nice place to be.
Yeah.
So we decided, we're in our late 20s. Let's make the jump. And if we love it, uh, you know, great. We'll be here for a while, and it's a nice place, and we have a good university, so on and so forth. If we really truly hate it, at the end of the day, we can always go back to the US,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
It's easier to undo that one than to stay in the US and say, oh man, I really wish I lived in Australia. So we decided, let's do it. Let's go. And so
Nice.
that's why we're here. Um, and so far we've been here just under a year at this point, and it's a very nice place.
That's awesome. When did you decide that you were headed for the world of academia as a career?
That was essentially my senior year of college, um, where I had done a bunch of different types of things. So I actually like an I don't know how deep this lore is at this point, but I believe I was the cubicle's first intern back in
You were. Phil told me
2016.
about it. He showed me these videos. I went and visited them a few in like March. And yeah, he was like, "Oh yeah, Keaton was our first like cubing intern that we gave a career to, and I'm very proud of giving careers to people in the community."
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, there's some like ancient videos of my channel with when I lived with Phil. I lived with Phil
You
during
lived with Phil. That's
the
incredible.
yeah. I don't know how much I should say here, but um, neither of us. I feel like 10 years later, neither of us really knew what we were doing.
Sure.
As an intern for this company, but also like a friend. Um, but also a poor college student. Uh, you know, it, I lived in Phil's living room. He was a bachelor at the time. He had a one
Yeah,
bedroom place, and we set up a little futon in the corner, and I lived in his living room for a summer. Um,
amazing.
and I had a blast. Working at the cubicle was a lot of fun. Actually, it was a lot of fun. And there were quite a few things I learned from that. Um, but that was the summer after my sophomore year. And then after that, I decided, look, I enjoy doing this. But essentially, I want to try out more things before choosing a career.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I don't know if I ever really communicated that to Phil in a really good way,
Mm,
given that I was 18-year-old at that time. But I went and did a semester abroad studying hardcore math. So I did combinatorics for essentially a full semester's worth of classes, plus research, in Budapest, Hungary. Actually, where the cube, where the three by
yeah.
three was
Erno
invented.
himself.
Erno, I met Erno in that trip,
I
which
saw
was
the picture on your website. That's so cool.
and then I worked at a bank for a summer, the sort of my junior year summer. And I had essentially these three pieces of experience, and when it came down to what do I want to do with my life, I think at the end of the day, I decided that I wanted something a little bit more standard. I love cubing. I still love solving Rubik's cubes. Um, but And I wanted something more normal. Is not makes it sound like we do weird
I know
stuff,
what you mean, though.
but I'm risk averse. I didn't want to sort of put my livelihood into this one specific industry. Although I guess I've done that now with academia. Um, but the idea here was, I was planning on going to a bank, and then during my senior year, I took this behavioral economics unit, and I just fell in love with it. I loved it
Hmm.
so much. I'm reading all the papers that are being mentioned in class, which we didn't have to read. I'm going and buying books to go and read on the side about the career trajectories of different behavioral economists. Um, so when that bug hits you, it's one of these things where it's okay if you're willing to do this on the weekends and on the evenings every single day, like and it's
Probably look into this more.
yeah, we should do that essentially. So I went to graduate school for that, and then sort of the rest is history.
Hmm. So did you go straight into a PhD then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started my PhD when I was 20. We had this grad student happy hour at a bar, uh, and I essentially went to the
Love it.
bartender. I was like, "I'm not 21. Can I please still come in?" And they go, "Just get in here, whatever. Just don't buy anything."
Yeah.
So yeah, so I graduated fairly young from the PhD, and I'm as a lecturer here, I'm one of the
Yeah,
younger ones.
you said late 20s, and I was like, postdoc, late 20s? That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm 28. I started at 27 for the lecturership here. Um, but yeah, I feel like an old man sometimes.
Nice.
Even more.
Sure. Hmm. That's really cool. I have so many questions about economics and stuff, but this is a cubing video, so I should probably ask cubing related questions.
You can ask whatever you
Um,
like.
sure. Maybe we'll swing back around to it at the end, but I have cubing questions for you as well.
Tell me.
Um, so it, I have to ask about the missed world record thing. Like,
Which one?
did that bug you when it happened? For context, if somebody who's watching this somehow doesn't know this, the day that Lucas Eder got the first sub 5 3x3 solve ever, like historic world record, at the same competition in the same room on the same day, Keaton also broke the 3x3 world record single, which is like the single most coveted accomplishment in cubing, only to have it not ever officially count as a world record because somebody else broke it on the same day. And for whatever reason, we only count world records at the end of a 24-hour like competition day or whatever it is. So like did that bug you? Were you like, I don't know, what motivated you going into cubing? Did you want a world record? Did it just happen? Like, I don't know. What were your thoughts at the time?
So I think let's unpack this sort of piece by piece, right? What motivated me in cubing back in the day? I mean, nowadays it's mostly I like hanging out with people, and it's a nice little thing to sort of distract yourself. I listened to a couple of your episodes with DG and with Patrick Ponce, and I think to a large extent, as we get older, we sort of recognize that we will not be as competitive as we used to be, but there's still this sort of competitive spirit that we have, and cubing's a nice outlet for that.
Yeah,
Back in the day, I think I was more on I wants to break my personal records. And it just so happens that my personal records in 3x3 and one-handed were sub world record. Or my PRs at home. Or my PBs at home.
nice.
Sorry.
Okay.
Um, so from that perspective, it was always one of these, oh wow, I'd love to break the world record, but at the same time, I it's one of these, it could always happen any given Sunday kind of thing,
Sure.
but I
But
wasn't
you were
expecting.
fast enough that it was very feasible. It wasn't like, well, if the stars align and I got a 1 second PB in competition on 3x3. But
Correct.
okay.
It still was not every day I'm getting a sub 5 single kind of thing,
Well,
but
sure.
it was one of these, like, it's not impossible to get. Um, and so competition was a really important sort of driver for me. And specifically that sort of November 2015 kind of timeline was, um, I had made nationals finals in 2014, but I had missed out in 2015. But I sort of peaked in terms of world ranking in terms of average, sort of just earlier that year. And I was in a very competitive region. So Patrick mentioned this when he came on. The Northeast, sort of mid-Atlantic Northeast region of the U.S. at that time was really, really fast. I mean, Colin Burns, the former world record holder of 525, was someone that I would pick up in my car on the way to competitions in Pennsylvania and New York. Um, and the people around me, not just sort of in the region, but literally at my high school and at my university, um, were trying to break records or getting very close to. So, I went to high school with Thomas Shaliga, who is a square one world record holder from 2016. The guy who got me into cubing really is Felix Lee, a former North American record holder for Pyraminx. Um, a couple years below me at my high school was Pavan Ravindra, who got multiple national records for one-handed. And
Yeah,
if you're old enough to remember the 2015 U.S. Nationals finals, gets a 558, which is world rank 4 at the time.
I know exactly the video you're
Like
talking about. Yeah.
really, really, that was my high school. These are the people I went to like hang out with after school at McDonald's and at people's houses, right? So,
Hmm.
part of it was my own intrinsic drive, but part of it was also everyone around me was really, really good at solving Rubik's cubes. And so that was what I did.
Right.
Um, and so from that perspective, that's a lot of what I cared about. So I cared about, my own personal results, but I also had a really good group of people around me, and sort of, I felt like we had a sort of good atmosphere of encouraging people to push themselves and move forward and try to be sort of better. And it was friendly competition. It was also competition, right? There were both of these two things in there.
Sure.
I wanted to win, but I was also very happy when my friends did well. And so that sort of brings me to November 21st, 2015, a day I will never forget the date of, um, which is the day of River Hill Fall 2015. And so for me, breaking the 3x3 world record single in round two with the 5.09 was, I mean, just the most electric moment of my entire life up until that point.
Okay, so it meant a ton to you. Like
Yeah. Oh
it,
my God.
yeah.
So I don't have the audio on my channel of me breaking it. If you look at the video that's on my YouTube channel, I didn't record the solve. I clipped two different pieces together. One
Oh,
is
yes, yes, yes. I remember this video.
exactly one person just happened to be filming me. And he cuts the video off right as my reaction starts because I don't know, it's like a 10-year-old kid who's just randomly recording people at this competition and happens to get my solve.
Right.
And then the other clip that I put in there is Paul Etter, Lucas's dad, recorded some of the sort of the aftermath footage just as like um, just a thing to have because, oh my God, the world record 3x3 single was just broken at this competition.
Hmm.
So I don't have it on my channel, but on Will Callen's channel.
Yeah, I was gonna say Will had that one video, the overhead one,
Yes.
where you can
Will?
hear like the actual screaming happening in the background.
Yes. And 18-year-old Keaton in that one was instantly. I'm sort of already known in the area for having somewhat over the top reactions to really good singles. Um, and when you get the 3x3 world record single, no holds barred, right? I just like all my emotions fly, and it was the best sort of moment of my entire life. And so it was really, really fun. Um, and obviously a lot of the attention is something that people at that age really like. And so I enjoyed it for the 81 minutes that I had. Um, and then sort of the following round, Lucas gets the 490, right? Really, really impressive. Um, and frankly, uh, uh, from my perspective, I really hadn't let the 509 sort of sink in enough to really have any reaction other than, oh my God, my friend, just got a really good time. Oh my God, it's world record. Just like,
Yeah.
congratulations. I literally just happened to be right behind him as it happens. Um, so, give Lucas a hug and then get out of the way, is more or less the MO on that one. And in terms of being an 18-year-old trying to deal with this, um, I think most of the emotions that I had were positive in the sense of, I just did this really good thing and something completely out of my control happened that just doesn't give me the exact same status or recognition that you might otherwise have. But, you know, it's, um, it's sort of out of my control. I did
Hmm.
literally the best that I could possibly do in this situation. Um, and it just so happens that that doesn't mean that I'm the best. So, that's largely how I felt. It is always a little difficult to sort of have that sink in and sort of recognize that you can't control everything, and that that's okay. So there were some mixed emotions sort of in the following days and weeks after this. But I think you sort of get used to what your place is, and I think at the end of the day, there were still a lot of really big benefits specifically for cubing that came about because I got the 509 first. Um, Obviously now, if you're sort of a budding YouTube storyteller, that day is something that is on everyone's agenda. There's a Stu Cube video, there's a Cube Master video. There are plenty of videos on
Yeah.
that day. Um, but you know, uh, I got sponsored by a Cube company, right? Moyu at that point, I had a relationship with them because I used their Cube. And that meant perks that 18-year-old Keaton would not have gotten otherwise, right? Um, we talk about sponsorships nowadays. It was still a thing back then. And essentially the deal that I had was this handshake agreement of, you know, we'll let you go to the major competitions in the world. And you're not going to get like a check in the mail, but you want to buy this flight, you want to get this hotel, like, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Which
Uh,
is like what you want anyway.
which is like, oh my God, someone is going to go pay for me to go do the thing that I love doing. And I get to go to a really cool place and hang out with, hundreds of my best friends.
Hmm.
Um, so I think at the end of the day, at the end of that day, there were some mixed emotions, but reflecting over the years, yeah, it would have been really nice to get. It would have been really nice to get the world record sort of officially recognized. But given what I got, I can't complain.
Yeah. Okay. So it meant a lot, but it wasn't like frustrating necessarily. Like a little bit, obviously, but hmm. So more of like a getting PRs was the motivation. You were
Yeah,
fast in like a lot of stuff though. Like most of your more competitive results, average wise, podium wise, came from one handed.
yeah,
You also had like a 5x5 podium in 2014, which tell
podium.
me about the well. What do you mean 5x5 podium? Like why are you air quoting it? You got a podium at
So
nationals.
so yeah, yes and no. So this one
Oh,
I
what's the
learned
story
of
here?
many years later, actually. Um, that podium at that competition for 5x5 at US Nationals 2014 was Felix with like a 50 something average, Felix Zendegs, Kevin Hayes with like a high 50-second average,
Oh wow.
Sungbum Cho, Steve Cho, who also had a 3x3 world record later. Steve is from Illinois, um, but represents Korea in the
I
WCA.
remember him.
So those
Yes.
three were like way up at the top. And then there's like a 10-second gap. And then there's this huge pack of people. And I just happens to be the fastest of this slow group of people at that specific round. So I was not on the podium. I have my hardware from my
What were
one
you
or two podiums
using
later.
in 2014?
Sorry?
What cube was it in 2014?
The Shengshao. I still
Did
use
you
the Shengshao
was
5
this like
by
a
5
Florian modded blood, sweat, and
Yeah,
tears went into it?
still have it. I
Really?
mean, the outer layers I still think turned great. The inner layers turned terrible. Um, but it's that was sort of the end of the era of the Shangxiao. That was when everyone's got either the Aochuang, or I guess a couple years later the Bochuang. Um, and this was the thing that people were sort of moving to. Um, but I, for whatever reason, happens to mod my 5x5 really well. I could not reproduce it if you asked me to, if you paid me to. Um,
Yeah.
but it happened to turn out really well, and so I just kept using it essentially until magnets came around. Really, it was really really
I
good.
was that like I modded it well and I couldn't reproduce it thing is so funny. Like there was a lot of early cubing that was like that. I just did an interview with Lars Vandenberg, like the guy who invented the
Oh
square one
yeah,
method and everything.
square
And
one.
he was like, "Oh yeah, before the first world championship, I bought like 4 square ones from the one company that made them, and they all came stickered with a different sticker scheme. Like the colors were on different sides of each one, and they all turned differently. And I just had to pick the one I liked the most and get used to that one. But that's just totally normal. And he said at the competition, everybody's square one had a different color scheme. Like
Oh
there was
yeah.
no uniform color scheme for scrambling and everything. They just kind of like made it work.
Well, if it works, it works, right? I got the good 5 by 5, so I practiced a bunch of 5 by 5,
Yeah,
and I guess I was the best of the worst in that year.
there you go. Fortunate. But one-handed, I feel like you've had like a much longer run. Like you can't really downplay one-handed skill. Like you can be humble. You still got fourth at nationals. But like with one-handed, that I assume was a more like intentional. I'm going to get good at this and stay good at this kind of practicing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's the only event I ever officially got a record according to the WCA, and it was an event that I practiced an enormous amount. Um, partly because the people around me, Pavan Ravindra, Andy Huang, who was not a household name, not even sort of back then, but was and still is one of my good friends. Who he was third in the county and like 20th in the world, um, in terms
That's
of one-handed.
insane.
Yeah,
This is like back when we would joke about like not even the fastest Luke G in Kentucky. Like this
yeah,
is that kind of statistic.
yeah. So I had a lot of good one-handed solvers around me. I liked the event a lot. Turns out that um, one-handed sort of forces you to slow down, which makes look ahead really easy, which means as long as you can turn sort of reasonably well, you can get fast fairly quickly, sort of relative to your 3 by 3 skill. Um, and you don't have to learn any new algorithms. So it's sort of a nice perfect storm of if you like just doing a lot of solves and hanging out with your friends, then you can just do a bunch of one-handed and get fast pretty good, pretty
Yeah.
quickly. I just like the event. It's a lot of fun, personally. Um, and we had a lot of one-handed in the area. These competitions had a lot of the event, so more motivation to practice. But yeah, I did practice for a long time, and it sort of came in 2 big waves. There's the 2015, 2016 wave, where I broke the national record. I won U.S. nationals in 2015 for one-handed, and sort of practiced a lot. And then I sort of petered out for a while. Sort of life got in the way. I stopped practicing as much. And then during graduate school, actually, um, I essentially had a summer off in between, you know, in between semesters. And I decided to just spend a lot of time that summer solving cubes. Um, so I did a lot of one-handed that summer. I I didn't +2 out of making world's finals in 2019. But I had a +2 in the middle of the average, and had I not +2'd, I would have made world's finals. Um, so sort of a, "Ah, man, that kind of sucks" moment, but it was one of the
Sure.
things that I was practicing a lot for, and that residual practice sort of continued on into that fall. And that's where I have what is still currently my PR average of, I think, 11:15. And then I also got the second almost missed world record single of I don't even remember the time, 7:26, 7:28. Um, where if you watch the video, I dropped the cube on the last turn. I can't watch that video.
Oh
Like, actually, I
man, you and
cannot watch
Jaden
that
McNeil know
video.
what that feels like. That's crazy.
Yeah. So at least that one was my fault. No, there were no other factors other than me not being able to
Yes.
solve the
Yes.
cube. Um, but yeah, I practiced one-handed for a while, and I still do a little bit of practice every here and there. I'm like a second slower than I used to be, maybe second and a half. But on the good days, when the hand's feeling good, when I have time to practice, I can still get get some low 12s. I got an 11 average for the first time in like 7 years earlier, in 2026, so I was very pleased with that.
Nice. The light is still in your eyes when you talk about it. Like you
I
still
still
enjoy it.
Yes, I love solving Rubik's cubes, dude. Um, I still love doing it.
That's fantastic. Um, I heard from Schwan that you did get a win over a lot of fast people. Um, how was that experience? Going to Felix Mdeg's wedding and doing that whole competition and everything.
Okay. So when I moved, so when they interview you for an academic position, you
Mm-hmm.
essentially go through two waves of an interview. You do an online Zoom interview, right? 30 minutes. Uh, Tell us about your research, a couple basic questions. Thanks, that's it. Then they'll email you like a week later if you sort of go to the second round, which is a fly out. And it's exactly what it sounds like. They fly you out. And in most places in the US, your interview's on a Wednesday, you fly out Tuesday night, you interview Wednesday, they fly you back Thursday. But when they fly you to Australia, because the flight is so damn long, you have a couple days before your actual flyout to get adjusted to the time zone and sort of recover from the fact that you were on a plane for
Sure.
16 hours. And in that period, I reached out to the Cubers that I knew in Melbourne. One of them is Felix, and he was kind enough to take some time and go to dinner and hang out for essentially an evening. And then when my wife came down to do her interview a month later, same thing. Um, and around the same time, uh, sort of Felix and who is now his wife, um, sort of came, essentially moved in together here. And sort of when we moved, there's essentially new couples in Melbourne. Let's go on some double dates. Let's hang out. Let's have fun. Um, I solve Rubik's cubes. He solves Rubik's cubes. I do economics. He has a Bachelor of
He
Commerce
works in
from Melbourne
finance.
Uni.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a runner. He's a runner. Like if I'm not, I like football and he likes football. If I'm not friends with this guy at the end of the day, like I've done something horribly wrong in my life.
Sure.
Uh,
Yes.
so we'd known each other and we'd sort of talk, but it wasn't like hanging out as much. Um, so that was sort of the impetus for essentially why we went to the wedding. Um, at the wedding, there, as you can tell from Instagram, Lego Borromeo sort of has a bunch of posts about essentially who's at this wedding. Um, but you know, because I was the only delegate in attendance, Felix essentially asked during cocktail hour, we're going to have this mini competition. It's going to be best of two. And sort of the point is, you'll have, and this is a great idea for people who are thinking about how to include a competition in their wedding without making it the main event so that your wife is going to be okay with this happening. Uh, right? You have, yeah, a little station set up, and then you have all the people who are cubers sort of go and do a couple of solves. And there's a Polaroid camera, and you take a Polaroid with your time, and then you can stick it up on this little board. Um, and write a little note in the sort of
The
the
Polaroid
mark.
camera really sells it for the
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the aesthetics angle.
Look, I got married almost 4 years ago, and I listened to this. And I'm like, oh damn, I should have done this. Um,
Yeah.
but since I was a delegate, he asked me to run it. And the thing is, if you want to get a large number of cubers through this kind of process, um, you can't do averages of five. There's just not enough time.
Yes.
It's best of two format. You get, two scrambles from a jar. And then I would do them. I'd time people and sort of, go on, I let them go on their merry way. And because it's a wedding, nobody brought their own cube. Felix essentially had a set of GAN cubes on the side. And these are sort of, bottom of the backpack travel cubes.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
not in great condition. And people were really struggling with them. Do I still have the times? I might still have the times on my phone. Uh, I'm not going to do that live on the spot, but I still have the time somewhere on my telephone. Um, but because it's best of two format, essentially, and because everyone is getting a different scramble.
That's
Um,
true. That
yeah,
happened too.
yeah. So it's like the perfect storm for an upset in this case. So at the end of cocktail hour, everyone is done, and I'm the last one to go. And so I switch Eric Ackersdijk, the old 7.08 world record, um, sort of next oldest guy in the room, essentially, is my judge for the last two solves as everyone's sort of leaving for dinner. And I bust out the like easiest scramble in the world is what Eric Ackersdijk chooses for me on orange, so nobody would have done it, but a co-neutral person. And I bust out like a 6.2, and I'm just like, oh my god. So uh, that was the luckiest scramble of my life.
The
Like
day that you
six
beat Max
X
Park.
bar, OLO skip, A perm with no AUF from exactly the angle that you want, right? What else could you ask for? Kind of thing.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
so it's a lot of luck from the format. Um, and yeah, I was very, I went, Felix had this huge, like, glass trophy for winning, which, oh, God, should I get it? Oh, I'm going to go get it. I'll check.
Yes, please.
So, look, this is it. So it's a, I think it's
That's
really cute.
awesome.
By the way, it's not an open competition. It was invitational for the wedding.
Sure.
So if
Open
you want
sounds
to,
cooler.
but but yeah, I swiped that away from someone who's much faster than me on average, but just so happens to not get as good of a single at this best of two format competition.
That is amazing. I
So
love that your point about like that's a good way to work a little competition into your wedding. I have a selfish wedding thing to share too.
tell me.
I wasn't I got married a little over a year ago. My anniversary was a week ago. A
Oh,
week ago today.
congratulations. Happy
Yeah, thank
birthday.
you. And I was not as into cubing a little over a year ago. I assumed that when I grew up and got married, I would have to be an adult. And then it turns out I married a woman who was like super excited to be like, Brandon, if you enjoy cubing, do it and do it well. So I'm thankful though. One of my relatives knew that I was into Rubik's cubes, and there was a joke among all the extended family that like if they ever needed to set a trap for Brandon, you just set out a Rubik's cube and he would like walk right into it because he would go solve it. And so when we walked in to cut the cake together, they put an unsolved Rubik's cube next to the cake. And so of course the first thing I did instead of focusing on the cake or whatever was solving the Rubik's cube, and that netted like my favorite picture of the wedding
Oh,
was the
wow.
Rubik's cube right here. And so this is like my wife and I's favorite picture from the wedding day. And it's because some relative put a Rubik's cube into it. But yeah, all that to say, if anybody's getting married, don't be ashamed of working the cube in somewhere tasteful, whether it's a cool like competition like you guys had or something like that. I'm so thankful we have that picture.
That's a good one. Yeah, so I didn't have a competition in my wedding. My wife vetoed that one very quickly. Because if you go and look at I think there's still videos of like Chris Olsen's weddings. With they
Those are
have
out there some. Yeah, I've seen clips of his where he and Sarah were doing the competition
yeah, so
little
they
race
have like
thing.
a legit competition at their wedding, which is the thing that I was thinking about. But cocktail hour is like you essentially take it from main entertainment to side entertainment for the cubers, and they can opt in, and then everyone else can do normal things like have a drink and have a good have some food and have a good time. We had these Oscar's treasure chest cubes,
Yep,
which were
I
we
remember
call the
those.
rings. So
Oh,
the
cool.
interior is spherical and there's nothing inside. But what we did was we modded the cubes so that two different centers had like essentially two different rods sticking out, and you cover them with a little bit of foam, and then you can put a ring through the gap in between the rods coming from either side, and that's where the rings are, right? So we had the ring bearers bring the Oscars treasure chests down the aisle, and then we solved each of our cubes. It was just a checkerboard and a
That is so cool.
set pattern to not delay the wedding by too much. And because the cubes are really fragile when you do a bunch of mods on the interior. But we did that, and that was a lot of fun. There's a nice little way to bring cubes in as well.
That is awesome. I love that idea. That's so, so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how is cubing as an adult now? Like you've kind of alluded to it. Like I love solving Rubik's Cube still. I'm not as competitive as I used to be. I know you commentate a lot, which I want to chat about that too, because I'm
Oh yeah.
commentating some at NAC this year and I need advice. But like how's your relationship with cubing as an adult now? Do you wish you could be more competitive? Are you like kind of content with where you're at competitively? How is delegating? Like I don't know. What is cubing life like now?
Sure. So I can sort of try to tackle each of the dimensions kind of separately, but the overall picture nowadays is I will probably do like an average of 100 once every week or two. Right. I don't really have the time to dedicate. I see I'm subscribed to Dylan Miller, for example, on YouTube, and I see his YouTube live streams where he's got like 70,000 solves post worlds. If I go to my own CS timer, I probably have 10,000 solves in the last like 4 years.
Yeah.
Uh,
Dylan
something.
is a unique case though. Like Dylan
Yeah, he's
solves
a cuber.
a lot, even compared to other top cubers a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, but he's the one that shows up on my YouTube, so that's the reference
Yeah.
point I have. Um, I simply don't have the time. One thing I'm learning as an adult, especially as I go from sort of graduate student postdoc, where I don't have a lot of responsibility to lecture, where I'm in charge of a room of 40 students, and I have a PhD student, and I have a master's student. Like I have to plan and tell them what to do. Otherwise, you know, they'll be like, not lost. That makes them sound like they're incompetent and they're incapable, but um, they'll spend a lot more time exploring than they probably need to. That's
Hmm.
how I'll put it.
Okay.
As you get older, time becomes a limiting factor. Um, my lifestyle in terms of costs hasn't changed, but relative to being a grad student, my salary is higher. So, you know, what used to be a monetary constraint is now a time constraint. And that simply means that you have to trade off among different things. And one of them for me is I solve Rubik's Cubes a lot less than I used to. And I have to go to fewer competitions um, than, uh, than I'd like to, especially here, given the very high cubing scene in Australia. Um, uh, but I still try to make room for stuff. On the day to day, I essentially tell the Speed Cubing Australia guys, like, I will essentially never be a main delegate at a competition. In a region that has like 10 delegates, you don't need me to do that. But essentially, what I can do and what I have time to, and what would be useful is for some of these competitions that only have one delegate really signed up, and where our main guy, Lennon, has to go and try to, twist some arms in order to get people to come out. Like, call my name. I'll sign up for a couple per year, especially if they're sort of in my area of Melbourne. Sort of where I can contribute, where I can do something for the community, but also, you know, after we record this podcast, I'm going to go into the office and work for the next 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
So it's one of these, especially during this semester, time is a real crunch. Um, but you still try to get a little bit done. Still try to um, solve some cubes because I like doing that. I have one in my office. I also have a banana cube in my office, which when my colleagues' kids come by, they love to see it. It's a fun thing to show off. Um, and then, so the last thing you asked about was commentating. Now, I've been commentating sort of, I guess, for a while. The first time I did it was Euros 2018. Sort of, a couple of cubers went, "Hey, you speak English. Come to the booth and let's chat about cubing for a little bit." Because the stream was in English that year. And then I essentially applied and wanted to be part of the World's 2019 broadcasting team. I got it, and that was my favorite experience cubing, or cubing commentating. That year, I knew most of the top people personally to varying degrees, but I knew them. I knew all of their results. Not only do I know exactly what the trajectory looks like in competition, I've also gone and spent an entire week with them in Sydney and then in Melbourne, sort of up to the competition. And so I have a bunch of different personal anecdotes about, oh, look, Kieran Behan solves only green on Yao, and, his current set of results is this. Um, and then you just sit there and you talk into a microphone, as if you're just hanging out with some buds at home, right?
Hmm.
Explaining what's going on, and so on and so forth. And then that sort of morphed into doing a bunch of commentating during the pandemic. So we did cubing at home
I
for a
remember
couple of
I
years.
did those. Sat in my bedroom in the little closet desk I had, and I did the cubing at home. Those were so fun.
I'm grateful. Those were fun competitions. I definitely spent a lot of time on those that I should have spent doing research for my PhD. Uh, but at the end of the day, those were good. I'm really glad that we did them. I think it was sort of a grassroots thing that some cubers from Utah, Bradley Sampson, Calvin Nielsen, who's now out in California,
Yeah,
Sirach Grover, over in oh well, it was DC, and then it was Arizona, and now I believe he's back in New York right now. But we had a good group of people doing that. And part of my job was essentially to not just do some commentary, not just yap at a microphone, but also do the hello and welcome to Cubing at Home. I'm your host,
hmm,
Ellis. Here's a script that I'm going to read. Here are the people that I've lined up in terms of who's going to be commentating, and then who's going to be, what they're going to be commenting, or who
yeah.
they're going to be commenting over. And then within these people, what they're going to be talking about during these. Um, and I think after coming back from the pandemic, especially when Kevin Hayes starts to take a bigger and bigger role in cubing commentary, this sort of became formalized into, instead of doing all this the Wednesday before the competition or the Thursday of the competition when the stream starts on Friday, it then became, we're going to arrange 20 interviews during this. We're going to, for Worlds, for example, we're going to do this. We're going to have them balanced across each of the different each different continents and events and types of cubing people out there, in terms of top players, in terms of content creators, in terms of,
Yes.
in our case, sort of representatives either from Cubing USA or from Rubik's or from the cubicle that were sort of around the event. And Keaton, here are the six that you're going to do. You need to go and spend like a week researching these people, figuring out what they care about, what they're going to do, and you need to have a 30-minute conversation with them, which will both be interesting to the viewer and then also for the person that you're interviewing has some value for them. Oh God, I interviewed Cubehead, right? Cubehead is a guy that the community at that point wanted to hear a lot about, but this is the at that point was putting out somewhat less content than he had for the years prior, right? So it's, go figure out what he's going to talk, like what he's interested in, what he's thinking about, the big projects that he's worked on, and go try to ask things in that space so that you can learn something. He can talk about the things that he's been working on and putting a lot of effort into, and that the community wants to hear. um so that was sort of a much more formal thing. But then on the commentary side for top events, I sort of moved from a play-by-play kind of guy, which is what I was for Worlds 2019, more into the color role, where you're asking me in 3x3. Manu is doing the commentary on that, and then it's, Keaton, what did we just see? And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, right? Beautiful X cross on blue here. But he fumbled the third pair. This was a very easy OLL PLL combination, or he did a ZBLS in order to force edges oriented on the top, but he ended up getting a Soon case, which he ended up having to do a UU prime to go. And you have to essentially provide the viewer in this case with enough information to understand what's going on, and then you have to figure out who is your viewer to go and say whether or not you can see whether or not you can talk about ZBLS, or whether or not you need to say he oriented all the edges. You can see the cross on top, and see sort of how much detail that you need to have. So, for example, for 3x3 finals at Worlds, it was you need to dumb this down, not because you know people are not smart, but because people will be tuning in who do not know cubing. This will be something that they're seeing on a front page somewhere, or they're a grandma who's watching their, whose kid is really excited about the world championship, and they're watching all together in the living room on the TV. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to explain that to that person, as opposed to when you're in clock round one, or when you're in one-handed round one, group 8, and you're seeing, you know, Jasper Murray up on the stage. You can talk about EOLR, and you don't need to clarify the acronym, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
Hmm.
Sorry, so it's a long sort of
Oh,
rant
you're
there.
good. That was really, really like a lot of helpful pieces of context. I think my follow-up to that is going into commentary with different people. How frequent was it that you were commentating with somebody who you didn't really know? And how do you approach commentating on a team? Do you intentionally try to get to know that person and figure out if one of you is going to be the main commentator and a side commentator? Do you talk about it beforehand? Do you just kind of like prefer to feel it out? Like how did you approach it when you would sit down with someone in the booth? And do you have advice for me as I'm going into this? Well, having to sit with a few different sorts of people and feel out each of them, because I've never really done it before.
So, my thoughts there are, back in the day, it was just two guys hanging out, or I think the only, sort of the main woman that was in the booth alongside me at different points was Dana Yee,
Mm-hmm.
whom I've known for a very long time, and so I already have sort of a rapport there. Um, when you're hanging out with someone that you know very well, and it's very casual, you just, you know, you record a conversation.
Yes.
When you're doing this with people that you don't know as well, one, I mean, it's good to just hang out with them to get an idea of who they are and sort of how you're going to play off of each other. Because just knowing personality and sort of knowing when someone is taking a pause to sort of say something else, or when they're done talking, is just a basic thing that you can do in the booth, especially with sort of looking at the person. Like, yeah, I'm done here. Um, but it flows much more natural, and I think people feel it when you can just sort of know they're done and you can pick things up.
Cool.
I think
Okay.
it's worth trying to understand which person you are or earlier on in the process rather than later. So for Worlds, like I mentioned, I was the color guy, right? I was not the play-by-play guy. And so, for example, when Manu and I would do some casting together, Manu, and this is the same for All Stars, right? Manu does the play-by-play. Oh my God, Maddie just got a 4.68. That's North American record. And then I come in and can say something on top of that afterwards. Um, but it's, you should understand who's the main guy, who's the play-by-play guy, and who's the color guy that just sort of adds the sprinkle of information on top necessary to understand it, right? Who's your Joe Buck? Who's your Troy Aikman? Kind of situation. And so I believe Kevin's still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll be able to give you some specifics about NAC this year. But it's very exciting that you're on the NAC team. I'm very sad that I'm not able to go this year. So who else is on? Can I ask that? Is
I
this
think
something
so.
you're allowed to
Yeah.
say on the stream?
Let me think. Carter. Carter Thomas is on it. Zachary Miller's on it. Brandon Lynn is on it.
Brandon Lynn.
Mm-hmm. Manu.
Classic.
Alyssa.
Yes.
There's a couple that I'm missing. Come on, Brandon.
Zach Rydell.
Yeah, Zach's on it. That was one of the obvious ones that I couldn't think of his name.
Mm.
I don't personally know most of these people. I know that Dylan Miller is going to guest cast. Like, I think my title is like guest caster or something. Like, I
Oh,
won't
nice.
be on as frequently.
Huh.
But I know Dylan will be helping a little bit. Let me see who else is in the channel.
That sounds like a good group.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've worked with. I've not worked with Zachary Miller. I've not worked with Carter Thomas, but I have done casting with Brandon Lynn. We go way back. And
Dan
then
Pastashov, he's on
oh,
the
that
list
that's
as
a good
well.
name.
Yeah.
Das Cubing.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
that's a good name. Um, yeah, Zach Rydell. He was in my area
Dan.
back when I lived on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Very.
Dan taught me how to judge at my
What?
first competition in whenever this was, 2018. I so vividly remember, like, I knew exactly who he was, and I didn't tell him this. And he was, I remember, like, I was like, "Can I help judge?" And he was like, "Do you know how to judge?" And he was like, kind of tired. This was like before lunch, and I could tell he was really out of it. And I was like, "Mostly," and he was like, "Okay, mostly." So then he sat down, and like I made all the mistakes. Like I thought a M move was a +2, and I thought, like, this and this were not regulations. And then he just left, and I was like, "That was so cool. Now I know how to judge." And then he went off and judged. But yeah, that was how I met Dan, and I haven't talked to him since then. And he for sure does not remember this interaction.
Now you're gonna cast together at the main
Exactly.
competition in the
Worlds
U.S.
collide. Worlds collide. Um, I had some questions for you about the WCA, like more broadly, because you are a delegate and you have been for a while. But it sounds like you're not super involved. So,
So
like,
I get. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm less able to do a lot of the day to day, but I definitely do try to keep up with the big trends in the organization. For example, at time of recording, we essentially had an election a couple of weeks ago for brand new board members.
Mm-hmm.
So I was active on that. I read through every single one of the applications. I asked one of the candidates some questions about their application that I thought were unclear. Um, and I talked with many of my fellow old delegates about trying to, understand what their opinions were and how they were planning on voting so I could make the most
Yeah.
informed. So I
Well,
still
that
try to
was
keep
one of.
up. I just can't.
Okay. Very
I can't
good. So my
quite
questions
up
are
to
for
speed.
sure. My questions for sure still apply. With, like, my perspective on cubing is that in the last year, it kind of feels like a lot of things have kind of settled into an equilibrium
Whoop.
where we still there?
Yeah. Can you just say
Okay.
that last part again? A lot of.
Yeah. It feels like in the last year, a lot of aspects of the community are in a bit more equilibrium where there's not a ton of like crazy growth happening that there was a few years ago. There's not like a ton of new competitors popping up all over the place in North America or speed cubing methods or innovations. Records are slowing a little bit. Like it feels a little bit calmer as a whole, but we have kind of like this new head-to-head thing that's coming in. Um, and now the WCA leadership, on the other hand, has had like changes all over the place. Like there was this chief officer, and then board changes, and then more board changes. Like where does the organization kind of hope to like take cubing over the next year or two? Like what are people internally going, we hope to do this like once the championship season is over? Like what are the kind of the short term, medium term, long term goals? And if you're not the right person to ask, that's fine. But I'm kind of curious what you feel like the state of the organization right now and what's coming up next.
So, I guess I'm not a WCA board member. I'm not in charge of the organization. Blah blah blah. Disclaimer. Disclaimer.
Sure.
Uh,
Yes.
so let me tell you what I think, sort of about sort of big picture kind of stuff, and where I sort of see the organization trying to move. Um, I think COVID was a huge loss to competitions in the short term, but had this essentially explosive growth, sort of bubbling up right behind it, right? You have a very successful documentary. You have an activity that is not on a computer that kids can enjoy. Um, and then you also have this really great community with this real big social aspect that is starting to bubble up again once sort of pandemic restrictions start to ease. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a perfect formula for this explosive sort of non-sustainable cubing growth, right? So when it comes to the trends that we are seeing nowadays, in terms of um, reductions in competitors relative to what we are experiencing sort of just post-pandemic, I think of this much more as a reversion to the mean rather than some true drop-off in terms of cubing interest. I
Hmm.
don't believe cubing was going to be have some exponential growth where every child in the world is going to be doing this and not playing Fortnite or
Sure.
rolling on TikTok. It sort of had its moment, and I think we're sort of going back to this equilibrium of, slow and steady growth rather than something sort of explosive and exponential. I also think that in terms of the records that are being broken, we got our first sub 3 single ever very recently. We have these two, the kids really, but these two extremely fast competitors battling out at the top, both in terms of breaking records for a 3x3 average, and then also in terms of providing very entertaining head-to-head matches,
Hmm.
um, both within the WCA format and then also things online like, and I'm a big fan of Monkey League. Um, so so
Big
from that
event coming up in a
perspective,
couple months there.
hey.
The event's going to be super cool. The in-person one in New York. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm also expecting it to be Schwan Yi Yihong to be at the to be the people that are going to be going out, and I would be really surprised if that was not the case. Um, but uh, it's essentially I think that um, we can talk about sort of equilibrating back to what is sort of normal, but I also think there are lots of very exciting things that are happening in that space.
Yes.
Um, so I personally think these are very cool times. Um,
Oh, it is. It's super fun.
But sort of going back to what the bigger picture is at this point, um, I think the goal for a long time within the WCA was to essentially create a structure that um, moved away from what the WCA used to be. So 10 years ago, the WCA was literally a website. There was no legal entity backing this website. And we just so happens to be the thing that people saw as the legitimate force in recognizing cubing records.
Yes.
But there is no recognition. There's no legal recognition that this is like a legal entity of any kind. And then also there's no recognition from any higher governing body in sport um, in order to sort of give us some legitimacy behind just the fact that we happened to be the ones that were most organized back in the day, right? And the best with websites back in 2004. Um, so in the last few years, there's essentially been a push to say, look, the WCA's job is to let kids play with plastic toys on Saturday afternoons, right? From that perspective, we want the kids to have a good time and to really sort of be this entity that lets kids have a lot of fun and then lets people that are trying to go for records have their records recognized in some consistent capacity that has oomph behind it that they can go and show to, for example, a sponsor and say, look, I'm the world record holder or I'm the 8-time national champion, blah blah blah, right?
Yes.
But from the WCA's perspective, we're no longer just a bunch of guys messaging each other on a Yahoo group. We're now an organization that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of delegates all around the world, not speaking the same language, not coming from the same culture. And the idea is to create a system that lets you scale the WCA across all of these different types of entities, right? Part of that involves getting, for example, International Olympic IOC recognition. I think it's International Olympic
Hmm.
Committee, right? Recognition from them, which first provides some legitimacy for us, two unlocks funding. If you're an IOC recognized sport, countries will give you money to do the things that you want to do because they care about what the Olympic Committee cares about. Because one day
Yes.
it might be an Olympic sport. Um, Frankly, there are a lot of things that are IOC recognized that will never become an Olympic sport. but just having that status is important, right? So from that side, there's a lot of legitimacy that you want to have. And then the other thing that's sort of really been prioritized for a long time is um, whenever we vote in the WCA. So I'm a full delegate. I've been a full delegate for a very long time. If you want to vote in the WCA, you either have to be a full delegate or you need to be a senior committee member, right? And back when I became a full delegate, there were like 80 of us. And these are the people that cared a lot and were sort of at their peak of how much they cared about cubing. And
Mm-hmm.
so you want to have a board election? All right, 78 of us are going to vote, right? Nowadays, that we're a legal entity, that we have specific rules in place that are enforced by the US government, or sort of, you could get sued if you don't follow these rules, essentially.
Yes. Yes.
Um, you know, you have to have a specific number of people show up to vote. And generally, one of the problems now is with 500 people, many of whom are like me, who wants to keep, a foot in the cubing scene, but I don't read every email. People don't
Yeah.
read every email. I don't need to be voting on all this kind of stuff. What I'd like, in my perspective, is to have my regional organization, which used to be Cubing USA, is now Speed Cubing Australia. I fully trust them to do all of the due diligence and then have them vote on my behalf in the WCA. Right? There's also sort of been this push to try to get this to be the way that we vote and the way that we do things in the WCA. No, it also helps with other issues that we have, such as in a country like Australia, right? We are overrepresented in the WCA in terms of voting share relative to the size of the country.
Yes.
Right? 27, 28 million people. We have way more delegates because the scene is organized and the scene is very structured, right? Relative to, for example, a country like India, a country like China, much bigger countries that have relatively fewer delegates in sort of proportion of the population. So, trying to move things to the regional organization level is something that I think is important. For the reason of, we want to make sure that different countries are represented sort of equally. And that we don't want to give extra priority to specific regions that just happens to get cubing growth because in Australia's case, the greatest of all time lives here, right? So, no, from that perspective, that was the historical sort of view for many years from the board members that I'm sort of good friends with, and I very much support those opinions. I think the WCA as an organization is sort of having some soul searching right now with, essentially, do we want to do that? So, there have been many steps towards that. I think there have been some sort of unfortunate setbacks, but for example, the CEO sort of debacle that happened earlier this year was, oh, we happen to hire a guy who's so good that he wanted to be, he was hired by the LA Olympics. We can't predict that.
Yeah.
We like the guy, he's good, but how the hell are we going to know that he's going to get hired by the LA Olympics, right? We knew he was interested. We knew they were interested, but when a guy says, yes, I'm going to take this job, you're just going to assume that, yeah, maybe he was, second on the list. And if they only have one position, they'll have one position. Moving forward, though, especially with the new board members, I still think that many of these underlying trends are there. We want to move towards an organization that is able to scale. We want to move towards an organization that is going to be able to essentially provide the amount of growth that we are seeing in different areas and provide support and sort of maintain regions that may not be experiencing the same type of explosive growth. And we want to open
Sure.
up different cubing communities and sort of have that be something that, it's not the initiative of Mason Langendorfer, setting up Cubing Frontiers LLC and trying to go and, introduce competitions to every island of the Caribbean, but have it be a more formalized process that, of course, Mason Langendorfer can be a part of and should be a part of because he's very good at this kind of thing. but is not sort of resting on the whims and motivations of one specific person to be able to try to make some of this stuff happen.
Yeah.
Uh, so
When you say support the growth of, are you used a line earlier that was like the WCA's job is to help plastic kids play with toys on Saturdays. Um, it, is the WCA's mindset about growth like essentially growing that experience, or is it growing a more like structured competitive experience? Because those two things can often be at odds with each other. Like I've watched a number of kids, get their solve CNF because they forgot to turn off the front facing screen on their GoPro, or like they made some like very honest mistake at their second competition, and it's like, all right, DNF. So like that's kind of at odds with the Saturday experience. But I'm more drawn to the competitive side of cubing. Even as a little kid, I was, and I'm not that fast. Like I want to see that grow. So when you say growth, is this a both and, where it's like grow everything and also the competitive integrity? Or are you thinking about growth more in terms of one or the other, like organizationally, not you personally?
um, so I think the organization's priorities has been the and part of the problem is that, for example, our regulations are things that are built for both the kids playing, in a church community room on a Saturday, and also the World Championship.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the initiative, specifically the regulations team, I mean, really for like 10 years, has been to sort of systematically relax our regulations in ways that maintain the competitive integrity at the top, but also do things such as, I've been the delegate that tells a mom that there's nothing I can do. Your son's average is going to be DNF'd because he used the front-facing camera for the first three solves, and
Mm-hmm.
this is
Yeah.
all I do. That's now no longer a thing. I believe 2I is the regulation.
Yes.
Oh, don't quote me on that one though. Um,
I think it's that run. Yeah. I don't know the number either, but I know what you're talking about.
which is like there is now a regulation that says if the delegate determines that the usage of what is an illegal technology was incidental and not intentional, um, that it can slide. Uh, that's maybe that's not the right word when it comes to WCA regulation discussion at the moment, but um, you know,
Yeah.
you have the systematic relaxation of regulations, and which for most of these they don't affect the top level. Now, um, maybe we can go to sliding because I think this is another place where, um, you know, you know, I agree a lot with the decisions that the WCA board makes. I'm good friends with them, and in general, I see their vision and I agree with what they do. I think this is one of the cases where I, you know, what are the concerns, right? Essentially, we've been locked into this speed stacks monopoly for 20 years, right? You essentially have to use one timer, and if this one company decides to do something with their technology, you have to follow along because they're the only ones that make it, and they're the only ones that can legally use this technology in the U.S. because they patented it, right? So we had the StackMat timers for many years, which you will not have to go very far to find a complaint from a delegate about the quality of these timers. Um, there are always things that'll pop up on Facebook groups where you only have to like hover your hands over the timer for it to start, or if the room is really dry, then it's you know they constantly short circuit and you get going to all eights or going to all zeros all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can talk about and the basic thing is that if you're a monopoly in this industry, there's no incentive for you to innovate and get better and improve the quality of your product because you have, in this case, a legal right to exclude any other type of technology. Now, 20 years later, that patent is expired, and we essentially have this option in the back to be able to pull out another timer and say, look, we can use this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. My understanding is I'm not 100% certain on this, so I will sort of hedge a little bit. But my understanding is essentially that 4-pad comes with a separate patent. And
It does.
so
Yep.
making the full commitment to going to 4-pad locks you into the same monopolist for another 20 years, right? Um,
Are
which,
other timers allowed in the regulations right now?
no, it's just stack mad. Um, and there's sort of an infamous case from 2017 where an entire competition gets DNF'd. And there are multiple competitions in Vietnam that got completely DNF'd because they decided to use a couple of Yushin timers, which...
Right. So the illusion that we could escape the monopoly if we really decided to take the blinders off is nice.
Yes, but it would still be a two-pad, right? It would be a two-pad time you're allowed to use. And so when it comes to, does that solve the issue that we are currently having with sliding? The answer is no. Right? It does some things for you. It lets you essentially will get lower prices on stack mats because you'll allow other types of competitors into the market. Doesn't take a PhD in economics to understand that one. But, you will have still, my bad. You will still have sort of the sliding problem that you're going to have with any two-pad timer relative to a four-pad timer. And I think the decision is a really tough one because it's essentially like do you want to tie your hands as an organization for the next 20 years is essentially what the decision is. And that's a hard one to make. And my understanding of things is, it's hard to commit to something like that. And there are a lot of things that you essentially need to confirm before you go and do something like that. And in the meantime, when you have immobile regulations that cause problems that previously didn't exist with the technology that requires you to think very hard about how to implement it, you get cases like the 0.78 2x2 average, where technology, you can choose as an organization to lock yourself into a technology for that long. And then after that, fix the problem, but now you have another problem that's going to affect you for the next years. Or you can try to do a change with regulations, but hey, look, the regulations require, this arduous process in order to make any updates. You have to go by the book based on when the regulations were a thing. Blah, 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 blah. Right. And I'm sure someone out there will go, look, Keaton, there's a specific aspect of this discussion that you have missed, that was in some email somewhere. And to that I say, my bad.
Yeah, there you go.
But this is like, into the future, these types of decisions are hard decisions. And we have a refresh of the WCA board. I'm sure they will come with their new ideas. I'm sure they will also run into exactly the same problems that the old board had when it comes to how to manage an organization and sort of where to go from here. Right.
Sure.
So I think we will still face the same types of problems with the new board members. And essentially my hope is that they'll think of something that no one else has yet.
Yeah. Cool. I guess this is a good time to mention it, but I'd be happy to have any of the board members on here just to chat about how the WCA is doing and such. Like, I'm not really like pro or anti on most things WCA. I'm kind of like just interested to hear what's up. We're coming up on time. So Are there any topics or things that I did not ask about that you wanted to cover or chat about while we were on the recording?
All right. We got cubing, we got delegate, we got WCA, we got casting, we got moving to Australia.
Weddings.
Oh, check. That's a very important one to make to talk about. No, I don't really have any. I think we covered it all.
Love it. Okay. Well, I ask everyone the same question to end my episodes. What aspect of cubing gives you the deepest joy?
Oh, I love the people, dude. I wouldn't stick around this long if I hated the people. The competitors, my friends, people that I know, people that, were at my wedding, people whose weddings I go to, and in general, just, being able to essentially go to anywhere in the world and, just know someone there and have dinner with them and have a good time and be able to chat about this world that we're both a part of. It's just such a blessing to have in life. Right?
So cool.
It helps me do crazy stuff and move to crazy places and still feel like I'm back in high school, going to a different state in the US, solving Rubik's Cubes with friends on the weekends. Yeah, it's just such a joy, and I feel so lucky to have this life in many ways, right? So it's definitely the people. That's the thing that I love the most.